computer. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Z coming to you from NoVa Notes and in conjunction with Awanna Holdings. And I'm here chatting with my guest today, Terrence Evans. And what we're going to do, Terrence Evans from Terreva Investments.
Terreva.
And all the way from the left coast. And what he's going to do is talk a little bit about what he's doing in the note space, what his business does. And but before we get into that, I always have trouble sharing my screen here. So let me let me just share my my typical slides here with some information about myself. Let me go through a little disclaimer here that we are not selling any type of securities or anything like that. We're not soliciting you to buy anything. There may be some guests that I have on here who have programs, and you would obviously, if you want to connect with them in any kind of way, you do that on your own. Don't have any problem with that, but not giving you any kind of legal or tax or professional advice. So a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Awanna. Everybody calls me Z. I'm a retired Navy veteran, and I am a current DoD contracting officer. I have a master's in education and a bachelor's in education, a master's in public administration as well. Been a real estate investor for a little over 30 years informally, and I started my business in 2018 and decided to shift over into mortgage note investing. And so what I've been doing is having a lot of guests on here who are in the note space and lend us some of their experiences and things that they do in the note space. So enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about what a note is. I try and go through this quickly in most of my presentations, just so for those of you who are new and don't know what a note is. So if you have a mortgage, if you've ever taken out a mortgage loan, you've signed what's called a promissory note. Promissory note to pay back the bank or the lender who gave you the money to purchase your home. So as a note investor, we own the actual lien on your property, and your property is the collateral. So we don't own your property unless you go through the whole process of foreclosing on the property. We own what's called the paper, your loan. So that's enough about that. So let's get into why we're here. And we're going to talk to Mr. Terrence Evans from Terreva Investments. Terrence, I thank you so much for joining me today and talk a little bit about what you're doing in the note space. So I'm going to leave this up here, and or maybe I'll just take this down and then I'll reshare it again towards the end of the interview, and then we'll just talk a little bit about what you're doing. So let's go ahead and introduce yourself, Terrence, and tell us where you're from, what you do, and all of that.
Okay, thanks for having me on. My name is Terrence Evans. I currently reside in the Los Angeles area. I've been here for 24 years. I originally from the Atlanta area. Then I went to school in Boston. There go the MIT logo.
You got to show everybody that MIT.
This is actually pretty rare. I rarely wear this, like on a day like today where I have other stuff going on. I rarely wear this shirt because, people have their own ideas about certain schools and,
That's okay. I'm not mad at
it. But anyways, so after school, I started working. I'm actually an engineer, and this is my full-time job. My note investing is a side thing. Okay. But I've been a practicing engineer for the last 24 years.
Very nice.
And then over the last 4 years, let's say over the last 5 years, I got interested in real estate investing, and then I ended up settling on note investing, right. A year after that. So for the last 4 years, I've been involved in doing note investing.
So what kind of got you into note investing? Were you always into real estate investing, or maybe not note investing in particular, but any part of real estate investing, and then what made you decide to go into note investing, or what interested you about that?
So I have like a whole little story about that. I'm not a very interesting story, but I have a whole little story. So, I mean, in terms of the whole question of have I always been interested in real estate investing,
Probably more so in the traditional
yes and
sense,
no.
like
I mean,
most people.
sorry.
I said probably more in the traditional sense, like most people, you know, where they're either going to do rentals or, you know, something like
Right.
that.
So, I mean, actually, quiet as it's kept, you know, about 10 years ago, like let's say, I think it was like around 2007, I started, I started trying to get my my real estate sales license, right?
Okay.
Now, notice the time period that I set that,
Mm-hmm.
2007.
Yep, 2007. So here we are again.
So yeah, I mean, it was kind of like an interesting thing, just because, you know, I just see all these people, just especially out here, you know, where, you know, home prices are several hundreds of thousands of dollars versus, you know, where I was used to back home, where, you know, it might be 100, 200 tops, you know, in most places that I deal with.
Mansion, right?
Yeah. You know, so, you know, you imagine the commission check off of that. So that's what started that. You know, I'm looking at my engineering salary and I'm looking at these commission checks. I'm like, I need to do something different. Not even so much something different, just something in addition to.
Right.
So I went ahead and actually passed the test, but then that was 2008, and we all know what happened in 2008.
Yeah, probably not the best place.
So I basically, you know, I kind of just shelved that whole thing and put that to the side. Now, fast forward several years later, I was in a moment of personal transition, and I was looking to do something again in addition to, and I started, you know, I started this conversation with someone talking about this, you know, personal, I wouldn't say crisis, but it was just, let's just call it transition.
A transition. That's fine.
And I, you know, was talking about that, and she was like, well, why don't you, you know, get into real estate? Why don't you become a real estate investor? So I'm thinking like, okay, don't have money, you know, how can you do that? Right. So, I mean, I don't know. I saw this quote recently, and now it makes so much more sense. Don't wait until you're rich until you start getting involved in real estate. Get involved in real estate so you can become rich. So, yeah, or at least try to become rich.
All right.
So that was where I was at. So I started doing some research into my local real estate investing groups, and I, you know, stumbled across one that LA South RIA, and I came across that group because it seemed to be interesting. That people seemed to be cool. They didn't seem to be stuck up or whatever.
Right.
They had several different subgroups. They had one for fix and flipping. They had one for multifamily, and they had another one for notes. So naturally, like everybody else in the world, I was gravitating towards the fix and flip because everything on TV is about, you know, rehabbing, right?
Absolutely.
All the shows. So you know, I was going to that pretty religiously, trying to, you know, become a flipper. And one of the things about that particular group was that the subgroup leader had a standing deal with any of the attendees, and what it was that he was an active flipper himself. So he was basically saying, okay, if you guys find me a property that fits my requirements, we can JV on it, and we'll split the profits at the end. So, you know, for a good solid year, I was out here in these streets trying to find a property that, yeah, right. I had some close calls, but without getting into all the details of that, let's just say it didn't work out. So yeah, a year into it, nothing, zilch. So multifamily, it was kind of like the same deal. Like I was, and had money to get into a multifamily,
Right.
so I didn't really pay much attention to that subgroup. And then there was the note subgroup, and I didn't know what a note was. It didn't. I was like, what is this? This is,
Right.
you mean, what, paper? What is that?
They
I
like
did not
all of
understand what. I didn't understand what, conceptually what notes were, and I started going to that subgroup just because I think I heard that you could invest in a note with not that much money,
right.
and you could perhaps use retirement funds.
Mm.
So I was like, okay, fine. I'll start going to this and seeing what this is about, because I was still pretty hell bent on getting a deal,
Uh-huh.
and so just listening to how they were explaining how notes worked, how you invest, where they invest, I was starting to say, okay, maybe this is, somewhat
Better.
interesting. Yeah, maybe I can get a deal in this much faster. So I took a training class, an actual paid class. So that I took that under the Note Assistance Program,
Okay.
and
Yeah. So you are a member of the NAP Nation, as we call it.
I am. So yeah, so I ended up taking the class, and then that's when the whole thing got started. I started the Terreva Investments, the year following. I got my first deal, which actually I'm going to talk about later
I
in
want to
about an hour.
talk about
On my own program.
right.
But yeah,
It was
on
funny. Well,
from
I had just texted with Jasmine earlier this morning, and she said, "Oh, is that Terrence that you're talking about that got the $3,000 note?" I said, "Yes, it's Terrence." So I told her, I said we would touch on that. So because one of my questions was going to be, had you taken any type of formal training, or okay, so you found out about note investing. What then did you do? Did you go on to self-educate yourself? Did you take formal training? Did you just read books? Did you do the YouTube University? All of the above,
So that's what I was kind of saying before. Like, my training, as it were, was really just primarily that subgroup. I didn't really do much in the way of books or I might have looked at a few Scott Carson webinars, but I primarily got most of my training through the subgroup. And then, I mean, of course, Jasmine at that particular time was the note subgroup leader.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how then I think it was Jasmine and Mark Gold,
Mm-hmm.
and so then of course they pitched their own note boot camp at that time. That's what it was called,
Right.
and that was my formal training,
Mm-hmm.
going to that. And
Okay.
then of course they offer their own stuff after, beyond the note boot camp.
Right.
That was it.
Right.
That was
Okay.
basically how. And then of course you learn by being in the note.
Right.
That's so the formal education piece is always going to just only be about half.
Mm-hmm.
The other half is going to be from actually being in the note itself, especially if it's a non-performing note,
Mm-hmm.
because everything's a little bit
So
different.
currently, what is your focus? Are you in first position, second positions, non-performers, performers, both? How is your focus in notes?
So the ones I've done so far, I've been in non-performing first position.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay.
So,
And so,
but I think that COVID, and in conjunction with other things that are going on within the industry, is starting to force a little bit of a change, a little bit of a shift.
okay.
Just because, so one of my major, things is that I need to have all of my tools available to me in order to properly execute, a non-performing note. And when COVID happened and they instituted all these moratoriums and stopped the evictions and all that. Well, it's taking an arrow out of my quiver, which is foreclosure.
Right, right.
And if that's the case, then I mean, look, I might not foreclose on a borrower,
Right.
but I need to have at least the threat that I can foreclose on the borrower.
And they know that you
and
can't do that right now.
And if the non-performer borrower, if he kind of feels empowered enough to believe, well, he ain't gonna do anything anyways, he has no reason to pay. So why am I gonna invest in a note where I know I in addition to natural state foreclosure timelines,
right?
Now I have this other built-in delay. So why am I going to, why am I going to do that to myself? So I think if anything else, what's probably better to get into right now is, I mean, you can still do non-performer, but I think the shift is getting it more into performers, especially performers that have been produced by seller financed investors.
Right.
So I've started to do campaigns targeting those investors, those lenders, versus the traditional non-performer institutional paper that a lot of traditional investors get into when you get into the space.
Right. So yeah, I was getting ready to ask you about how COVID had been affecting you. So because typically the people that I've interviewed have been investors that have more performing notes, and so my question to them is always, well, how has COVID been affecting the borrowers being able to pay on their loans? Most of them have said that they've had a very small percentage of their borrowers who haven't paid. So it's interesting to hear it from your perspective, someone who's doing mostly non-performers, how that kind of affects you. So yeah, I have one of my own right now that I can't do anything with because they extended the moratorium.
So one of my non-performers that actually was really more of a re-performer. So he, as I shouldn't say gender, the borrower, the borrower actually, COVID really hasn't affected his. I can't help myself. The borrower really hasn't changed his pattern in terms of paying or not paying. I mean, it's been
because they weren't paying anyways.
Well, actually, no. I mean, he's been paying for the most part on time since we've had the note.
Okay.
And I mean, last month it was a little bit of a slip up, but he was just late. But I need to see that performance again in order to kind of draw some conclusion that maybe there's some COVID effect. But I mean, it hasn't really been an effect up to this point. Of course, that can always change, but I so far I share the same experience as some of the other interviewees. It hasn't really affected me much.
Okay, well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So when what made you decide to, I guess, start your company vice just being an investor out of a retirement account, or like some of the other investors invest? What made you decide to do that?
I mean, again, I was really trying to look for another way of investing that I could be better at and be successful at. Because historically I've done other stuff. I've done stocks and options, and well, I suck at options, so I mean, because just I'm too like hair trigger. I'm too like nervous. So I get in at the wrong time. I get out at the wrong time. So at least with this, with real estate investing and then with notes, I haven't. It's longer term investing where you just go ahead and just let it do its thing, and then you make money at the end of it, especially if you bought in right.
Right.
But I mean, so the second part of your question, I actually do use my real estate funds to not real estate, my retirement funds to fund some of my deals. Now I'm sure that's a little bit different because you're not supposed to actively be part of your deal if you're using real estate funds.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I use both, pre-tax and after-tax funds.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So that's a good segue into my next question, which is, so what are some of the long-term goals for your company? So I know you mentioned earlier that you started out and maybe you wanted to do some fix and flips, and then you moved and transitioned over into mortgage note investing. So as you know, all notes are kind of different in the way that you exit them. So maybe you want to exit a note, like you say, by foreclosing on it, and then maybe once you get the foreclosure completed, maybe you want to use it as a rental or fix it and flip it or do a seller finance on it. So do you foresee doing any of that type of thing down the road long term for your business, or are you simply just trying to get your borrowers to start performing?
So I mean, I've considered creating my own notes as opposed to just trying to find notes, and there's several reasons for that. One is just the supply of suitable notes is not exactly the best right now, especially if it's non-performing. Let me get into what I'm thinking right now. So yeah, I was thinking about going in and purchasing some houses and then doing seller finance on that, and therefore I'm creating my own supply of notes so that I don't have to worry about some broker overcharging, trying to be too greedy. I don't have to worry about a seller being too greedy with trying to get too much for his note. So I just want to kind of create my own supply, and then I can then sell that off to somebody else or to another company. So I mean, that's really where I'm headed. But I need to see how this COVID thing impacts the real estate market at large to in order to proceed with that. Because I don't. There have been lots of opinions about how this is going to go, and I'm not even sure. So far, the residential market has been pretty stout. Pretty if it's not been just straight level, it's been going up. It's still been increasing. So I'm still waiting to see whether or not that's going to be the case, or we are going to see some type of correction over the next year. I don't want to go in and buy a house when we're going to experience a dip. So it goes back to the whole buying stocks at the wrong time thing. But so that's where I'm pretty much headed. I'm going to be more interested in, as I said before, in trying to buy more seller finance notes from the regular folks out there, as opposed to targeting just the institutional paper. Because again, and one of the things that I don't know how many of the newbies actually pay attention to, or actually watch the podcast, but they cannot be so desperate to get a deal where they're willing to pay any price. And that's one of the reasons why you know, we've had this run up over the last, couple of years, is that, we have all these new people enter the space. They're not taught well, and then they go in and they buy at any price. They buy, a non-performing note at 75, 80 cents on the dollar.
Whoa.
Where's the profit? If I go and buy anything at that price. So yeah, I don't want to be subject to that. I want to try to insulate myself as much as possible to that, going forward. So that's why I'm talking about, the seller finance angle of this versus the institutional paper.
Yeah, I know you were one of the first people that actually turned me on to seller finance. Remember when I was trying to sell my house?
Oh, that's right.
It was on there for so long, and you were like, "Why don't you just make your own note?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I figured it out later on. I'm like,
I'm still waiting on my check, by the way.
Once I exit this note that I have, I'll hook you up. I'll hook you up. So that's it, Terrence. We got a little audience today, and no questions or anything like that thus far. So I just want to thank you again for joining me. Oh, you have like a training program or something like that, don't you? Don't you do like a note school or something of that nature? Did you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. So I actually offer several different avenues of training, from the informal to the more formal. So in informal, I offer what I call monthly bunches of notes, which is going to start in
a few minutes.
In 30 minutes.
Okay.
It's just basically a webinar just like this, where we go over some aspect of note investing. I also, most recently, myself and Sabrina Allen, who is a noted industry vet, we recently put on Note Summer School, and that was a month ago. And that was like a 2-day long training workshop where we talked about notes from A to Z. So
nice.
that was definitely fun and entertaining. So I then parlayed that content into what I call Note Summer School MNSS Reloaded, which is basically I put that on the Teachable platform, and it's the same content, same video content, same materials that we gave the students. So we had like a Bible, a 175-page Bible that we gave the students. We gave additional reference materials to the students. So you can still get all that material, from in MNSS Reloaded. Could I share my screen?
I got your screen up right now where they can contact you, and then you can give them, all the information.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool too.
Want to get from you?
Yeah.
I don't have the inbound information, but I have your Terreva phone number and email up there on the screen for everybody to see. And this is recorded, so they can come back and look at it and get in contact with you to get the pricing and, more information about all the things that you offer.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. So, hey, thanks again, Terrence. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me on my little show. And
thanks a lot, Z, for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So we got to get together, and I got to whip you up in some more words with friends.
Okay, so this is recorded, right? Because I want to record this for all eternity. Okay, so Z had actually, she really whooped up on me really badly. Like the first 4 games, like I think I lost by like 100 points. like 150 points.
Oh
Like
my God.
it was like I was considering retiring from the game. Like I was gonna put this down. Like wow, I had never played a player like this before.
Oh my
But
God.
let's just say that the tide has turned.
It turned a little bit. I noticed you haven't challenged me anymore, but that's okay.
Yeah,
That's
because
okay.
I'm
That's
going out on top, baby. I'm going out on top.
all right, Terrence. Hey, thanks again. I appreciate you. Everybody, Terrence's information is up here on the screen. Please reach out to him if you want to learn some more about the programs and everything that he's offering. Hey, you guys have a good weekend. Thanks, Terrence.
Thanks, Z.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye bye.